What's going on, YouTube? I know I'm a little late to it, but I had to listen to the whole 3-hour podcast to get a good grip on what's going on. Obviously, Trump hit up Rogan's podcast late last week, and I watched it a little bit over the weekend and almost all of it today. Listened to it at work. I mean, overall, I think it's pretty good. I mean, I don't know what we're a little bit too late for this, I think, having like any huge impact on anything. Maybe some really middle of the road people that are really like actually undecided on who they're going to vote for would watch that, listen to it. And I mean, Trump is who he is. He's being himself. He's all over the place when he's telling his stories and things like that, and obviously exaggerating here and there. And it just, I mean, honestly, it's just the kind of person he is, it seems like, at this point. It's pretty interesting to listen to. He has some solid stories. There's nothing really in there of like super substance, like anything I haven't heard before, me personally, like on his political stances or takes or anything like that. Maybe if you're a person who's not that into politics or hasn't really been paying that much attention politically, watching that would give you some insight into what he really thinks. I guess maybe that's what he's hoping for on that in that end. But like I said, yeah, overall it was pretty good, pretty interesting. 3 hours. I mean, I listened to the whole thing. I didn't really get super bored during any of it. They talked about all kinds of things. I mean, obviously, 2020 election, this election, censorship. They're getting into aliens at the end. I mean, they're all over the place. JFK assassination, opening the files up, all these things. There's some pretty interesting stuff in there. And yeah, like I said, maybe somebody who's not politically initiated in that way, like where they're not paying a whole bunch of attention, it would be worth it to give it a listen, because I think he comes off as, I mean, relatively pretty likable. It's kind of funny. It's really obvious if he likes you as a person, it's so obvious that he's like, he's always calling people beautiful, amazing, awesome people, and then if he doesn't like it, he just calls everybody he doesn't like stupid. So it's pretty obvious to see where he stands on people he's talking about in the podcast. Rogan tries his best to kind of like wrangle him into answering some of the questions and like focus. He's definitely not standoffish with him or anything like that when he asks a question and he kind of just diverges from the topic, like, and talks about kind of what he wants to talk about. It happens a couple times. What are you going to expect? I feel like that probably happens in a regular conversation anyways, but obviously it's quite a bit worse when it's political shit. Like, it's just what it is. But Rogan does a decent job of letting him kind of talk what he, like, take his tangent that he wants to talk about and then kind of like asks him again and brings him back in on it. I think the only thing he really didn't get him to truly answer was like the election 2020 stuff, and I guess Trump was kind of hiding behind the fact of like, what he's like, I'll give him the fact that it is hard to, what are you going to do, present all the evidence, like all the evidence that he says he has for the 2020 election, whether he thinks it's stolen or they lost or however you want to phrase it, it doesn't matter. But it is a lot to try to bring up in like the last hour of the podcast that he's talking. Basically, he falls into, which he's not lying, where he basically falls into the thing where he's like, the judges wouldn't hear the cases, they would just dismiss them on standing. And I don't know how you really argue with that. That's just what happened. That is a fact. They did dismiss a ton of these cases just on standing, and then you can decide for yourself whether you think their decision to say there was no standing is valid or not. Either they just didn't want to hear it, so they just say you have no standing, or he actually had no standing and it was just a pointless case to listen to. I'm not making that call. You go listen to all that for yourself and figure it out. I mean, there was a ton of stuff. He seems pretty adamant about it. I mean, he's obviously never dropped he thinks he lost. He didn't lose. It was basically stolen from him. My personal opinion, I think, like I said, I don't think it's so black and white to just say it was stolen or whatever. These elections always come down to like swing states, and really only come down to maybe like a couple 100,000 votes on the high end. Like, it can come down to like 20, 30,000 votes in certain states and things like that. My personal opinion is, was it stolen from him personally? I don't know, but I think because of COVID, and all the one-off things that happened during the election, it definitely caused some issues, and there was definitely some inconsistencies, let's say it like that. I don't necessarily know if stolen, because I've never really seen any evidence that he was cheated out of winning the election in any sense like that. It's just more all these states that put into action mail-in voting, a bunch of different voting rules, and they get into that a little bit. And I think Trump is correct in saying that these states kind of bypass their own laws as far as changing the election law without actually running it through the proper course of government. That is, in my mind, technically cheating. I don't think it's the same as like they're just a bunch of fake votes or whatever. That's not what it is. It's basically they basically set the election up so they can guarantee a win. I don't know if that's an election, like an election stealing. They just played the game better than him in my mind. Like he could have won if they would have pushed for the mail-in ballot, the mail-in voting, and they would have got out and actually got people to vote. I think Republicans are pretty bad at that. Seems like Democrats are better at it. Heard all kinds of theories. I think the main one is that obviously cities vote blue. So it's a lot easier to walk around a city and get knocked doors and be able to get people to vote, especially if they can mail their ballot in and convince them to mail their ballot in right there and basically vote harvest and bring in all these votes from these cities. If you live anywhere I live, like where I live or where I grew up, like we're like a couple hundred feet from the next house. So it's not like you're walking down the road and talking to a bunch of people. It's like you would have to stop at each house, get out of the car, go knock on the door, go get back in the car, drive 30 seconds down the road, get out of the car. It's not as like easy as walking into an apartment building, knock each door as you go, walk house, walk 10 seconds, knock on the next door, 10 seconds, knock on the next door. So there's definitely some logistics that come into play, but I think that was the most interesting part of the conversation. Like I said, he kind of, as he says, he weaved around that question pretty solidly, because I think it's just, he won't answer it because either, my personal belief is he thinks he lost for real. He actually thinks it was stolen from him. I think there's some evidence that there was some fishy shit going on, but it's really hard for him to get the real evidence, hard evidence to prove it, and he's not going to be able to prove it. So he basically can't ever bring that evidence up and say, here's the facts, and here's how it was stolen from me. So he's not ever going to be able to really answer the question, and that's just, like I said, is what it is. I don't think it's a positive thing. I think it's kind of a negative. In my mind, he should have kind of just been like, hey, we lost, but we're not losing again. We're going to make it so big. Blah, blah, blah. We're going to win this time. That's the way I would think you should handle it. Not keep this shit going for the whole time. I don't like the mentality of like looking back on the past and shoulda, coulda, woulda, whatever. If you want to do it, just do it. Focus on the future and just be like, we're winning so big this time, it doesn't fucking matter what happens. I think that would be the better tact. But besides that, like I said, I think he came off pretty likable, honestly. Like, that was my favorite thing of listening to Trump talk I've ever heard by far. It's 3 hours long. I mean, he talks, the way he speaks is kind of goofy. He's just like, how many times he calls somebody like amazing or beautiful or whatever the fuck. He's always describing the people he's talking about. He's like talking about Air Force pilots. He loves fighter pilots. He loves pilots. He's talking about them like 8 times during the podcast. Oh, they're tall, they're handsome, they're beautiful. You'd want your daughter to date them, blah, blah, blah. Talking about these people that he gets along with. Whatever. It's kind of funny. There's a couple good, funny moments in there. The biggest thing that I think is just so annoying is, one, YouTube was being weird. When I search Rogan Trump, those 2 words, Rogan Trump, you would think first result, maybe the podcast itself, the 3-hour podcast of the biggest podcaster on the planet that has like 30 some million views already would be the first result. Nope, clips. Fucking news clips. So like all these either other like podcasts or whatever reacting to shit, or like MSNBC. There's a fucking Watch Mojo top 10 Trump clips, like Trump Rogan clips. Dude, give me the fucking source material first. Top of the list, YouTube. What the fuck are you doing? And then in the comments of Rogan's video, there's a ton of people being like, funny how we're not seeing this on the page, like the For You page, the number 1 page on YouTube. It's not showing up. had people having to search specifically for it. I had to go to Rogan's channel and then click videos and go find it and click it. That sounds fishy to me. I don't know why that video, that's the biggest video out right now, at least top 5 on YouTube. It should be right up on the top of the list as far as content to watch, and it's just not. Go figure. And then otherwise, it's talking about clips. Man, the news, like the journalists' review of this, obviously they're taking little clips here and there, something about Trump talking about dictators in North Korea and China and saying they're real smart. Obviously, you watch the whole clip, taken completely out of context. Obviously, he says Xi Jinping or whatever, I can't fucking pronounce it. Ping from China, the dictator of China, basically, the leader, the head of China. He says he's a real smart guy because he leads so many people with an iron fist, is the way he describes it. But then he basically just goes on immediately to say he's saying he's smart because he has the ability to manage this many people, not that he's a good person. And then the news, the articles obviously take that out of context. They do this multiple times throughout the video, where they just take a little clip and they're like, "Oh, look how awful this is." Blah blah blah. What are you gonna do? That's what it is. I would encourage you to go watch it yourself. You get a read on it for yourself. Don't watch the fucking Mojo top 10 clips. You're not gonna get the gist of the whole conversation. Get the context. Soak it all in if you can. Go give Rogan a view like he doesn't need it. Getting 500,000 comments on the video. Fucking more comments on the video than big YouTube channels get views on their videos. So pretty wild. I'm gonna link it here, so like you can just click the link on this and then go watch it yourself if you haven't already watched it. But let me know what you think. Are you on the same line? I think that was pretty good. I'd say like out of 10, how that podcast would have been the best podcast for Trump of all time. Like could have been great. I'd say it was like a 7 or 8. Like definitely not really anything super negative. Not really anything negative at all, and it just kind of made him seem regular. He obviously is still Trump. He talks the way he talks, but I enjoyed it. Let me know what you think. Drop a like on the video if you liked it. Dislike it if you didn't. Tell me why. And subscribe to the channel. Come back for some more. I'm almost at 60 subs now, baby. We're moving on up. Trying to get 100 by the end of the year. That's the goal. I'll catch you guys tomorrow.